Today's Ringer University is brought to you by UFC Pay-Per-View. Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson attempts to make UFC history as he defends his title against Ray Borg. Plus, one of UFC's fiercest rivalries will be settled when current women's bantamweight champion Amanda Nunes defends against Valentina Shevchenko. UFC 215, Johnson vs. Borg, Saturday, September 9th, live on pay-per-view. From Rodger's Place in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Welcome to Ringer University. Week 1 is in the books, and boy, did it ever live up to the hype. Joining me to make sense of it all, having just finished writing an angry Facebook post calling for Kevin Sumlin's hiring, it's Rodger Sherman. Rodger, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm the only one who wants to hire him.
You're on the Kevin Sumlin train completely.
It's so great to have college football back. And the way that first week goes where you have 5 straight days of football and each night had something awesome happen on it. It was just a wonderful week. I'm so excited that college football is back.
Lots of buildup and it lived up to the hype. Yeah, every 5 days it was excellent.
We should have 5 days of college football every week. We should eliminate the NFL and play Sunday night football, but it has Georgia Tech sometimes.
That sounds great. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start by recapping everything that happened in week 1, offering our analysis, thoughts, all of that good stuff. And then we're going to go into previewing week 2's biggest matchups and giving our picks for that. So before we get into our analysis, let's run through what happened in week 1. So every single team in the AP Top 10 won, most of them via a blowout. Every team in the AP Top 25 won, except for Texas and Florida, who both flopped pretty significantly, and we'll break that down a little bit more later. UCLA beat Texas A&M 45-44 in what may have been the game of the year already. But where we're going to start, Rodger, is what was labeled as the greatest opener of all time. Alabama against Florida State, number 1 against number 3, and Alabama rolled 24-7. What was your biggest takeaway from this game?
God, that football game was extremely mean. That was, it was billed as, such a great game. And for a half, it was close. And then Alabama did what Alabama does. They were just extremely cruel and vicious. They shut down every potential offensive thing that Florida State tried to do. And then they injured their quarterback for the season. It was just a complete dominant second half. They killed them on special teams. They dominated them on defense. Their offense still could use some work, but I don't think it's going to matter if you can hold an offense as explosive as Florida State's to 7 points and injure their quarterback and have a bunch of turnovers. They might be fine with just an okay offense if they're that vicious on defense.
Yeah, so if you are looking to nitpick Alabama's performance in that game, it would start with Jalen Hurts, right? He finished 9 of 18 passing and only 10 of 18 passing and 9 of 17 for 43 yards if you take out that one beautiful touchdown pass he threw to Calvin Ridley.
Which is wide open.
Yeah, they really struggled to get things going in the first half, but overall, Alabama looked like Alabama. Dion Hamilton looked excellent in his return from injury. Damian Harris looked great. Their special teams looked great. All around, Alabama looked the way that the presumptive national title favorite is supposed to look. On the other side, though, Rodger, Florida State started strong, but DeAndre Francois tore his patella tendon and is out for the rest of the season. Do you think the Seminoles sort of stand any chance at reaching the heights that they had their eyes on before the season started now that he's out for the year?
Well, let's imagine they just lost that game and DeAndre Francois is healthy. They're still in a position where they needed to go probably 11-0. Win the ACC championship game if they wanted to make the playoff. And now their superstar is replaced with
James Blackman,
not a superstar, guy coming off the bench, 3-star recruit, not the guy who they were building around. And, so that you take their team from last year and you get rid of their amazing running back and their amazing quarterback, what's the hope for them now? Even if they do manage to win the ACC championship game, they're probably going to drop a couple games in there. And starting at 0-1, they're just not in position to have that happen. They could still have a good season, but they were the number 3 team in the country with national title hopes. And, that's gone. Do not play Alabama. Never play Alabama. Do whatever you do. Run away from them. If you want to win the national title and you play them in the playoff, that's fine. But don't intentionally schedule them. Are you crazy?
Yeah, a tough lesson. Virginia Tech's learned it. West Virginia's learned it. And now Florida State has definitely learned it.
If you're good enough, they'll come for you. but don't go out of your way to play them. They'll take your dreams and crumple them up into a ball and crumple your quarterback's knees into other things. And just don't play them, please. I'm begging you.
Talking about the injury with Francois, it's just heartbreaking, right? I mean, this happened for him personally, there was the shot of him being carted off the field, quietly praying, that just tugged on the heartstrings. It's tough to see any player, especially a college player, have their dreams ripped away like that. But this happened to Florida State last year when Derwin James, their star safety, went down right before week 2. So
who was great
in the opener. And so it's just really, really hard to see this happen. As far as James Blackman is concerned, he's got high upside. According to Jimbo Fisher and all the quotes I've read this week,
it would be really messed up if he said, oh man, this kid, don't trust him to live up to anything.
The big concern I have for him is he's listed at 185 pounds, which means he's probably closer to 175 pounds. And Florida State's offensive line is not the best. It's something that is arguably the Seminoles' biggest weakness. So if Francois was getting hit that hard and ultimately went out, and he's one of the toughest players in college football, I have concerns about how James Blackman's going to fare.
Yeah, and I mean, you watched that first game, and Francois was just getting lit up again and again and again by Alabama, and it's clear that offensive line is a source of weakness for them because they couldn't protect him for even 2 seconds against blitzers. Wherever Francois went, he was going down, and it almost felt like you just wanted the game to end so that he could get out of it, and he didn't, and it's hard to see.
It is, and yeah, for a team that had national title aspirations, I think 9-3 is probably about the ceiling at this point. We'll see.
That's
maybe Blackman could surprise, but that's a tall task. So speaking of getting up again and again and again, Rodger, there was quite a comeback that we saw on Sunday night. UCLA was down 44-10, and came back and beat Texas A&M 45-44. Let me read you some stats here because we love stats here at Ringer University. A&M went ahead 44-10 with just over 4 minutes remaining in the third quarter. So this is not like there was a lot of game left. There was under 20 minutes of game time remaining when they mounted a 34-point comeback. According to the win probability chart, because we love win probability charts.
They definitely always work.
Work. When A&M went ahead 44-10, they had a 99.7% chance of winning the game. So slim odds, to say the least. Josh Rosen, after getting brutalized in the first half, finished 35 of 59 passing for 491 yards with 4 touchdowns. And the Bruins scored on 5 drives that went 66 yards or longer. So I have an important question for you, Rodger. Does this epic comeback say more about UCLA or about Texas A&M's complete inability to hold on to a lead?
Josh Rosen is obviously awesome. You don't want to take away from this at all because that took such incredible play. They went on 5 basically 2-minute drills. You said each drive was 60 yards or more. Yep. Each drive was 2 minutes and 5 seconds or less. That's wild. But I mean, the coaching was just so bad by Sumlin. They were still running plays with lots of time on the clock, up 34. You know, he could have bled it. It's pretty simple to bleed the clock.
Just a little bit.
They were still throwing with their backup true freshman quarterback, Kellen Mond, who went 3 for 17 of the game. What's 3 for 17 percentage-wise?
Not high enough to warrant keep passing the ball.
And after they ran for 300-plus yards, they ran the ball 3 times in the fourth quarter. They could have won this game. When you're up 34 points with 20 minutes left, you don't have to play well to win. You just have to not play extremely badly and extremely stupidly. And they played awfully and stupidly. And, you know, I'm not going to blame the true freshman quarterback for that because he shouldn't have even been playing. They have a senior, Jake Kubanak, who they left on the bench. And instead they turned to the true freshman. It's such bad clock management, such bad roster management, such bad play calling that, you know, it's been a problem with Sumlin. He was already on the hot seat, and now he's on whatever extra level microwave hot seat. It was just such a poor performance by him.
Yeah.
Like it comes down to the coach.
The AD before the season, the Texas A&M athletic director before the season went on the Paul Feinbaum show and basically said Texas A&M needs to win more. This is about as bad a first step as you can get coming out of the gate. And a member of the Board of Regents I referenced it at the beginning of the show, posted a note on Facebook, and I'm going to read a little excerpt of this for you because this was...
He has a way with words.
He has a way with words. That's a good way to put it. So here's exactly what he wrote. Quote, "He recruits well, but can't coach the big games or the close games. Our players were better tonight. Our players were more talented tonight, but our coaches were dominated on national TV yet again. I'm only one vote on the Board of Regents, but when the time comes, my vote will be that Kevin Sumlin needs to go."
I like that he said Sumlin struggles to coach in the close games, because this wasn't even a close game. It was a 34-point game. And Sumlin managed to coach poorly enough that they lost it in regulation.
Right. So my take on this game, one, it's incredible. Sunday night, I was throwing things across my living room.
What'd you throw?
Was screaming, remote, popcorn, anything that I could possibly get my hands on, picture frames. It was really a fun time.
A lot of broken things.
The game ended on a fake
household.
spike. It was a fake spike that ultimately won UCLA the game, which can't be emphasized enough. But as far as takeaways, I don't think that this game is really taught us that much about either team, right? Texas A&M's defense last year was terrible. They have a tendency to collapse in the second half of games and seasons under Kevin Sumlin. That's exactly what happened here. UCLA, always a penalized team under Jim Mora, had 7 penalties, allowed 382 rushing yards. There was a lot of stuff that happened in this game that we saw in last year's opener between A&M and UCLA, when Josh Rosen also led a fourth quarter comeback, only from 2 touchdowns down, and they lost that game in overtime. But I think the biggest thing for me is just let's enjoy what was one of the most entertaining college football games that you're ever going to see, and not try to draw too many conclusions from that, because that was just amazing to watch. And yeah, it was a masterpiece.
The ultimate thing about this game is that it was hilarious.
Absolutely.
It was like for A&M to lose a 34-point lead in 20 minutes.
Yeah, don't see it every day. Speaking of hilarious, Rodger, there were some other funny results to fans of teams that are not Florida and Texas, because both of those schools lost in a big way in week 1. Texas, first game under Tom Herman, lost 51-41 to Maryland, which is historically not a football powerhouse. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. And Florida...
Crab cakes and football. That's what Maryland does, baby.
Exactly. And Florida lost 33-17 to Michigan in a game that was much more of a blowout than the final score would indicate. Of those two programs, which one do you think has more cause for concern?
Well, I think an important thing to mention, and I'm not sure if you said this, but Texas lost to Maryland.
Yeah.
Which is worse than Michigan. Big Ten East foes, Maryland and Michigan. I think Michigan is the better team. You know, obviously there's a little bit of a difference in expectations, but I still think that was such a worrisome start for Texas, because there was hope that this wouldn't be necessarily a rebuild with Herman, even though it's his first year. You know, he came in at Houston and was immediately good. And Charlie Strong left him with some really good recruits. So there was hope that this could be more than another 500 season, which, you know, they got used to 500 or slightly worse under Charlie Strong. I think that's a really disappointing way to start off that tenure. And it was Maryland. You know, they are not a team that is expected to be good this year. And it was fun to laugh at them, but it's also not a good start for them.
Yeah, the cupboard was full. You mentioned it. This is not the situation he took over at Houston, where he found immediate success, one, but also had a bunch of players who were not highly touted recruits.
Yeah, he was in a better situation.
Yeah, he's in a much better situation this time, and that's worrisome. I'm actually more worried about Florida though. Mm-hmm. So let me preface it by saying I know that the Gators had 10 players suspended for their opener against Michigan. 10 is a lot, especially when one of them is Jordan Scarlett, your top running back, and one of them is Antonio Callaway, your top wide receiver. That said, all of the offensive issues that we've seen from Florida over the past few years all reared their ugly head in this game. Michigan's defensive line totally dominated Florida's front. Florida, whether it was Felipe Franks, Malik Zaire, could not find an answer at quarterback. And the score was 33-17, but the total yardage was Michigan 433 yards to Florida 192 yards. So even if Scarlett was there, even if Callaway is there, it's hard to imagine that they would have made that much of a difference in a game that felt a lot more lopsided than the score would suggest.
I mean, once again, they didn't score on offense. You know, they scored 2 pick sixes. And you know, something that encourages me actually, because Well, not that they didn't score on offense, but that they got 2 pick sixes. This is a really good defense, as it has been in past. They were missing a lot of players on offense. They'll get those players back, and they won't be playing Michigan. The SEC East is not the SEC West. They can still get some wins there. And again, that's a defense if you're getting multiple defensive scores per game. I don't think they'll get multiple defensive scores every game, but they have a much better potential to score on defense and offense. And if that's true, you're not bad on defense.
Yeah, so I guess here's what I'll say about Florida. It's not that I'm concerned that they're totally going to fall apart. It's just that I already basically see that their ceiling is not higher than what it was last year. Florida could be good enough to win the SEC East. They're in no way good enough to beat Alabama in the SEC championship game. It just seems like we're going to get, at best, the same story that we've got the past few seasons.
That's the thing. They look so much like they did under Muschamp.
Who has a quarterback now.
Yeah, it's the same thing that we've seen from them. And it's discouraging, because no corner has been turned.
Exactly.
And they're in year 3 under McElwain, who is a quarterback's coach by trade.
Yeah, and the schedule doesn't get any easier. I mean, they're going to have to play SEC East, a bunch of SEC West foes. The SEC had a little bit of a down year last year, but there's a lot of good teams in that conference. Things are not getting easier for Florida.
Again, they did not score an offensive touchdown. That's the best way to summarize Florida football in 2017 or any year.
Yes, that's apt. So we're gonna leave it at that. When we come back from break, we are going to dive into week 2, give our predictions for the biggest games of the weekend, and we have a good one, Rodger. We have a lot of exciting week 2 games coming up. We'll get to that after the break. Today's Ringer University is also brought to you by MyBookie. Ever since I started this podcast, people have been asking me for advice. Usually it's what team to bet on this week. Ohio State or Oklahoma, Stanford or USC. Well, let me tell you, where you're betting at is just as important as who you're betting on. That's why I always tell people to go to mybookie.ag. MyBookie has been in the business for years, and their reputation is rock solid. They do 100% cash bonuses, so off the bat you're making money for doing nothing. And they have the fastest payouts. Seriously, just 2 business days. You already know who's gonna win, right? So lay down some cash and win big today. I would only recommend a service to my listeners that's been good to me. That's why I'm urging you to make your way to MyBookie. You win, they pay. They have in-game live betting, the most rewarding player perks in the business, and an all-new mobile site that makes wagering on the go a breeze. Join now and MyBookie will match your deposit with a 100% bonus. Just visit mybookie.ag, mybookie.ag, and use the promo code RINGERU to activate the offer. You play, you win, you get paid. And now, back to the show. All right, Rodger. So week 2 is upon us now. Football is back, and we have even better matchups than we had in week 1. So what we're going to do is a classic Who You Got. We're going to present the 4 biggest matchups of the weekend and offer who we think are going to win each game. We're going to do this by order of time slot. And these are all night games, of course, because college football is stupid in that it does not spread out its marquee matchups. But the first big game to get excited about, Rodger, is number 13 Auburn at number 3 Clemson, a rematch of a game that happened last year in week 1. And the spread as of Tuesday is Clemson by 6. Who do you got?
I'm gonna go with Auburn. I like Auburn this year. I'm a big fan of Auburn this year. I think Jared Stidham is going to do great things for them. I think Gus Malzahn with a quarterback is a scary thing. They often have not had a quarterback under him. And Clemson might be ranked as the number 3 team in the country, but I just don't think that they're that good. I think that they're a very good team. Obviously, they won the national championship last year. Their defensive line is still incredible, but I do think there's going to be a big drop off without Deshaun Watson. He was a next level college football player. When they won big games last year, it was Deshaun Watson who did it. A college football, fill
legend.
it in.
He's a legend. He's
That's the right word.
Yeah.
And I don't see them replacing him with someone that can have them at the level of the number 3 team in the country. So I think this is closer than a 6-point spread. I think Auburn will win.
Outright.
Yes.
Okay. So what you're saying is you don't have faith in Clemson, that you're the only person on this podcast who's ever doubted Clemson. I, on the other hand, am going with Clemson. It was only Kent State, but Deshaun Watson's successor, Kelly Bryant, did look very good. His first touchdown pass was a 61-yard bomb to Deion Kane that looked like the type of throw that a really good college quarterback makes. Auburn definitely looked impressive in week one. They beat the heck out of Georgia Southern, which is not as much of a cupcake as it would sound. And they outgained Southern 535-78, which is a big deal, which is
78
to 78. That's a huge discrepancy. I'm done doubting Clemson. It's one of those things that they have sort of reached Alabama, Ohio State territory to me, where even though they don't have the stars that we're used to, they have enough talent and they have the infrastructure in place that I believe in them. And they've only lost 3 home games since 2011. To Pitt last year, to Florida State in the game
to Pitt
to Pitt last year, to Florida State in the game that Jameis Winston announced that he was going to win the Heisman Trophy to everybody, and to South Carolina when Steve Spurrier was the coach and Jadeveon Clowney was on campus. So playing at Death Valley is really hard. Clemson doesn't have Deshaun Watson, but they still have a loaded defense. And I was impressed enough by Kelly Bryant that I'm taking the Tigers, the Clemson Tigers, not the Auburn Tigers.
Yeah,
that's going to be confusing. Speaking of non-matchups that feature 2 teams with the same mascot, the second game that we're excited about this weekend is number 15 Georgia at number 24 Notre Dame. The spread on this, Rodger, is Notre Dame is actually favored by 4.5 points. Do you think that's justified? And who do you think will win?
Remember, we're also dealing with Georgia is in quarterback flux.
They are.
Jacob Eason injured last week in the opener. Wasn't a problem. They were playing Appalachian State, which helps when you're trying to ease in a freshman quarterback. But I think the line is justified because of that. I keep fluctuating on Notre Dame because I want them to lose so much, but they are also a talented team that was in so many close games last year. When they went 4-8, I have to say it louder than everything else because I really enjoyed that they went 4-8 last year.
It's important to remind everybody that Notre Dame finished 4-8 last year.
Notre Dame went 4-8. I can only say it so many more times. But now that Notre Dame is in the season past the one where they went 4-8, they have a lot of talent. They were probably better than 4-8 last year. I think going up against a team that is starting a freshman quarterback, I think they can do that at home.
Yeah, I have Notre Dame in this game too. I talked about them a little bit in the preseason podcast, but I'm pretty high on the Irish this year. And the one thing I want to say is everyone's going to talk about Brandon Wimbush, who is the new quarterback for Notre Dame this year. But the reason I think this team is positioned to succeed is the running game. Ever since new coordinator Chip Long took over, he's stressed that the ground game is going to become the focal point of his offense. And you saw that in week one. Josh Adams, who ran for 900 plus yards last year, carried 19 times for 161 yards with 2 touchdowns. Again, this is against Temple, but still worth noting. But the more impressive thing might have been Dexter Williams. This is a guy that nobody really talked about in the preseason, carried 6 times for 124 yards and a score. And I think Notre Dame really emphasizing sort of a ground and pound style is going to be in a position to succeed, especially with the talent they have on the front 7 on defense. If they can just get enough points as opposed to turning the ball over too many times and sort of choking the game away as they did a lot of times last year, I think they'll be in position to have a good season. And in a game, like you said, against Jake Fromm, who's making his first ever college start, I think the key is just limiting mistakes.
And Fromm is a highly touted recruit, but again, first college game, and it's going to be on the road against Notre Dame.
And Notre Dame has highly touted recruits too.
Yes, they do at a lot of positions. So
you know who's a coach who gets a lot of highly touted recruits, Rodger?
Tell me.
Urban Meyer, which is the next game that we're going to talk about, funnily enough. To number 5 Oklahoma, we have another top 5 matchup. 2 weekends, 2 top 5 matchups. College football is just back in a glorious way right now. Number 5 Oklahoma is playing at number 2 Ohio State. The spread as of this morning was Ohio State favored by 7.5 points. And this too is a rematch of a game last year that happened in Norman when Ohio State came away with the victory. Do you think the Buckeyes are going to do it again?
Yeah, I got Ohio State in this game because I think that Oklahoma's defense is going to just allow lots of yards against every modestly good team that they play. I have no faith in Oklahoma's defense. And Ohio State, we saw they did struggle a little bit in the first half against Indiana. It was a close game, but they have playmakers on offense. I think there are going to be yards to be had for the Buckeyes. I've got Ohio State in this one.
Are you concerned at all? So the way that Indiana attacked Ohio State in the opener last Thursday was through the air. Richard Lago was just picking apart their cornerbacks early in this game. Oklahoma's quarterback is Baker Mayfield, who is a little bit more polished, to say the least, than Richard Lago. Do you have any concerns about Baker Mayfield picking apart these Ohio State cornerbacks who really struggled in week one?
Yeah, it was a fun game to watch, Indiana, Ohio State, for that first half, because he was just throwing the ball over and over again to the same receiver. And
it worked every time. It worked every time. Yeah.
Well, it worked a lot. And Oklahoma runs the air raid. Baker Mayfield's incredibly accurate quarterback. Lincoln Riley, the offensive coordinator, is now the head coach. You know, they're going to give up a lot of points. They're going to score a lot of points. But I do think Ohio State's defense is good. I thought that was an uncharacteristically bad showing because it was a weird matchup, a short cornerback versus a tall receiver. I don't think that's going to be replicated week after week after week. I think this game will have a lot of points, and I have more faith in Ohio State to get a stop than I do in Oklahoma because, as I've said, no faith in Oklahoma's defense.
I'm with you. I'm taking Ohio State. I'm less confident than I was a week ago about this game. Ohio State was my preseason national champion. I don't think they're going to lose in week 2 to a team that I think they're more talented than. But the cornerback thing did concern me, especially going against Baker Mayfield. But the thing that gave me more optimism that I would have planned about the Oklahoma offense is J.K. Dobbins. The freshman running back looked sensational in week 1 against Indiana. I mean, we knew about Mike Weber. We knew about JT Barrett. But if they have this guy, Dobbins, he's 5'10", 208 pounds, ran for 181 yards in the opener. He looks like the type of guy who's going to be a problem for defenses, whether it's a defense like Oklahoma's that has been porous the past few seasons or some of these tougher defenses in the Big Ten. This guy looks like someone who can really wear defenses down and change the tenor of a game. So, Rodger, we are going to get to the last big matchup we're excited about this week. And this is something we talked about a little bit in the preseason podcast. Number 14 Stanford coming to Los Angeles to play number 6 USC. The spread as of Tuesday is the Trojans by 7. Who you got?
Listen, this is a Stanford Cardinal podcast. All Stanford Cardinal all the time. We know you're out there, Cardinal fans. Are there Cardinal fans out there?
Cardinal, but not Cardinals.
I didn't say Cardinals.
Because
This isn't a Ball State podcast. We saw them lose to Illinois. This is a Cardinal podcast.
Correct. Yeah, they're out there. They're out there. So you have Stanford winning this game.
This is your home for Stanford Cardinal optimism. Yes, I think we both do.
I do. I have Stanford winning this game. I want to hear why in particular you think the Cardinal are going to win, though.
And you know what? My opinion was reinforced watching USC play Western Michigan. That game ended up being a multiple touchdown win for them, but very close against not a very good team. They looked shaky on defense. They allowed a kickoff return touchdown too. A lot of holes for me in USC, whereas Stanford, no holes in Stanford. You know, always just forever marching forward with 9 offensive linemen, 1 quarterback and 1 running back. I firmly believe in Keller Christ, the quarterback of the Stanford Cardinal. I am a Christian. In real life, I'm Jewish, but in college football beliefs, Christian.
And you have faith this weekend that he is going to lead a victory of biblical proportions over USC. Very fitting. You're in on him. You're in on Bryce Love. You're in on David Shaw. It's a good recipe. I'm with Stanford too. Speaking about the Western Michigan USC game, the thing that concerned me most about the Trojans was their run defense. They gave up 263 rushing yards to Western Michigan. They had trouble getting pressure with the front 4, and now they're going up against a team, like you said, that starts an unknown number of offensive linemen, but it looks like it never ends. They face Bryce Love, who's a really, really good running back. Everyone's talking about the loss of Christian McCaffrey, which is clearly huge, but this guy is not like they're replacing him with Joe Schmo off the street. Bryce Love is very, very good and had a great season opener against Rice. And there's history here. The last 9 times that these two teams have played, Stanford has won 7 times, including 3 in a row. I like USC. Sam Darnold, I'm not really that concerned about his opening week performance. I love what they did with Jake Olson. We haven't mentioned that on the podcast, but they had the most heartwarming story of week 1. Yeah. So USC, that was incredible.
Emotional victory for sure.
Absolutely.
Stanford
I just trust,
no heartwarming stories.
I just trust Stanford more is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And for as good as Darnold is, for as good as Ronald Jones is at running back for USC, I don't have faith in the USC defense to be able to stop Stanford's offense and Bryce Love in particular this week. So I have Stanford winning.
And it did seem at times like their only offense was to give the ball to Jones. And supposedly Darnold is the Heisman favorite, #1 draft pick. And, I'm not taking away from him, but it didn't seem like things were all hooked up yet. I do think he's a really good player. I also think that their offense still looks like it needs some work. Their defense gave up a lot of rushing yards, and now they're playing Stanford. And if you have a weak rush defense, you don't want to be playing Stanford because the trees will roll you over.
That they will. So those are our week 4 picks. You have Auburn, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Stanford. I have Clemson, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Stanford. And yeah, we have a big weekend of games ahead of us, Rodger. Hope you guys will tune in next time on Ringer University. Thanks for joining us.